Welcome back to the channel, family, and another podcast. My name is Paul. I'm a happy member of CA, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Anthony.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Anthony B. I'm a grateful recovered drug addict, and I'm a grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. And it's nice to be clean and sober, and it's nice to be able to give back today.
We're really blessed to be starting the Tradition 7, the second half of the traditions. I'm really pleased that Anthony's come along today to give his time freely to carry a message of hope, faith, and courage to others. If you're struggling with drug addiction, please check out the other broadcasts on this channel. Please come along to a face-to-face meeting. You know, we have a solution. We know how it works. It begins with abstinence and practicing spiritual principles on a daily basis with transparency and accountability, working hand in hand with a sponsor who knows what they're talking about and is willing to altruistically take you through these wonderful 12 steps. So please check out the other broadcasts on this channel on each of the steps, the entire psychic change, the ABCs of addiction. Later in this podcast, there'll be information on the screen about how to get along to meetings, face-to-face and online. Please bear in mind you can forward this message to anyone that wants to hear it. Wherever you see this posted on WhatsApp, Skype, intherooms.com, or indeed YouTube, please feel free to get involved in the conversation below. We're not spokespersons for Cocaine Anonymous, we're simply members sharing our experience. So yeah, without further ado, Anthony, I'm going to put up the 12 and 12 illustrated and invite you to read from that if I can locate it. Miraculously, it's vanished by the wonders of technology, but here it is somewhere. It was here a minute ago. There we go. Look at that. I think we turn it sideways. So Tradition 7. I think what we normally do is we normally read the traditions to keep ourselves up to date. Shall I start us off, Anthony?
Yeah, that'd be great, Paul.
So the first tradition, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon CA unity.
Okay, the second tradition. For our group purpose, there is one ultimate authority, a loving God that he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern.
The third tradition, the only requirement for CA membership is a desire to stop using.
The fourth tradition, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole.
The fifth, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic addict who still suffers.
The sixth tradition, an AA group ought never endorse, finance or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property and prestige divert us from our primary purpose.
Beautiful. The seventh tradition, every CA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And there is this wonderful graphic here, which I suppose we can just chat through. And what are there, Anthony? There's 6 paragraphs down at the bottom, so we could do 3 each, if you like. And what have we got there in the graphic? Oh, we've got someone passing around the dish at the top right there, sitting on deck chairs in a room. Passing the basket at meetings is our way of meeting our responsibility for the work of CA, our own contribution to support the group, the General Service Office, and all CA activities.
There's another one there, outside contributions. Thank you. No, we have to pay our own way. So, you know, experience has shown us also that AA as a whole needs to be self-supporting and independent.
Yeah.
Every key to this tradition.
Yeah, as active alcoholic addicts, we were always looking for a handout in one way or another.
Part of our personal recovery came in making ourselves into responsible human beings. Pay bills here, because, you know, it's very common. A lot of alcoholics or, you know, drug addicts don't like paying bills.
I still don't like paying bills, Anthony.
Oh, well, you're not on your own there.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, on a serious note, that's absolutely true. Responsibility. And what we got up at the top here, we've got a Pied Piper with a handbag and a tartan, very unusual high skirt, making the tune of money, and someone going up the hill picking it up instead of fulfilling the primary purpose.
Instead of going down the right path, our primary purpose.
Right.
The path.
Now, do you want to do the first three, or do you want me to do the first three?
Go on, I'll do the first three. Yeah, my name's Anthony. I'm a grateful recovered drug addict, grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. We do have to be practical. A group can hardly hold its regular meetings on a street corner, and an empty basket won't fill a coffee urn. As soon as we became active in a group, we learn how many expenses are involved in making its meeting effective. Then our horizons broaden. What about the intergroup or central office? So many of us called to ask for help. Phone companies don't give free service. Beyond our own locality, we learn about the AA General Service Office and the work it does for groups everywhere. AA activity is self-supporting at all levels. And in every case, the responsibility comes right back to us, the individual members, for we are AA. Perhaps especially when we are very new, our contributions clink rather than rustle. The first members were in the same fix, and it seemed to them that AA would need more outside help than the modest gifts then coming in. Their plans required grand scale philanthropy. Tradition 6 hadn't evolved yet. Bill W. recalled a scheme for a chain of hospitals, but John D. Rockefeller Jr., an early friend, said, "I'm afraid that money will spoil this thing." A few AAs had already reached the same conclusion. Gradually, this minority became a majority, as experience showed that members themselves could provide enough to finance AA's proper aim.
In its simplest application, Tradition 7 is easily understood. When we hear about a new AA group being started with funds from a federal anti-poverty program, our quick reaction is somebody goofed. But then we come to borderline cases. Groups put on a raffle for the benefit of their central office and invite the public to buy tickets. A hometown paper runs an ad for an AA dance and show. Both projects would be routine for any other society. For us, both means that we've got the handout again, asking non-members for money. Often, of course, we don't have to ask. AA is now high on the worthy cause list. GSO groups politely turn down many unsolicited gifts and bequests. In Tradition 7, there's a note of realism, and some gifts may have strings attached. We even put a limit of 5k on the amount members may leave to AA in their wills or contribute annually while living, so that none of us can buy influence in AA, no matter how rich we are. Money may pose a different problem. If a group treasury grows too fat, beyond a prudent reserve, squabbling over uses for the spare cash, groups have lost their unity and strayed from their purpose. But there's one simple solution that strengthens our unity and advances our purpose: give the excess to AA activities and services. So we have here, Anthony, the wonderful 12 and 12 somewhere on this device. I think it's somewhere around here. Let's see. You know, someone commented while I'm just looking for this, Anthony, briefly yesterday, that the 12 and 12 is actually bigger than the first 164 pages. And also the first 43 pages, that's a quarter of the 164 pages of the basic text. The big book is largely about step one. It's just a couple of interesting points I think it's you and I have discussed step one, haven't we? We did a podcast a few months ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I mean, this is 18 years of collective experience after the big book was published. This is what this book is. Okay, I'll kick us off. My name's Anthony B. I'm still a grateful recovered drug addict and a grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. Each AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Self-supporting alcoholics. Who ever heard of such a thing? Yet we find that's what we have to be. This principle is telling evidence of the profound change that AA has wrought in all of us. Everybody knows that active alcoholics scream that they have no troubles money can't cure. Always, we've had our hands out. Time out of mind, we've been dependent upon somebody, usually money-wise. When a society composed entirely of alcoholics says it's going to pay its bills, that's really news. Probably no AA tradition had the labour pains this one did. In early times, we were all broke. When you add to this the habitual supposition that people ought to give money to alcoholics trying to stay sober, it can be understood why we thought we deserved a pile of folding money. What great things AA would be able to do with it. But oddly enough, people who have money thought otherwise. They figured that it was high time we now, sober, paid our own way. So our fellowship stayed poor because it had to. There was another reason for our collective poverty. It was soon apparent that while alcoholics would spend lavishly on 12-step cases, they had a terrific aversion to dropping money into a meeting place hat for group purpose. We were astounded to find that we were as tight as the bark on a tree. So AA, the movement, started and stayed broke, while its individual members waxed preposterous. Alcoholics,
Go on, you're all right. It's all right, go on.
Alcoholics are certainly all or nothing people. Our reactions to money prove this. As AA emerged from its infancy into adolescence, we swung from the idea that we needed vast sums of money to the notion that AA shouldn't have any. On every lip were the words, you can't mix AA and money. We shall have to separate the spiritual from the material. We took this violent new tack because here and there members had tried to make money out of their AA connections, and we feared we'd be exploited. Now then, grateful benefactors had endowed clubhouses. As a result, there was sometimes outside interference in our affairs. We had been presented with a hospital, and almost immediately the donor's son became its principal patient and would-be manager. One AA group was given $5,000 to do with what it would. The hassle over that chunk of money played havoc for years. Frightened by these complications, some groups refused to have a cent in their treasuries. Pass it on.
Despite their misgivings, or despite these misgivings, we had to recognise the fact that AA had to function. Meeting places cost something. To save all areas from turmoil, small offices had to be set up, telephones installed, and a few full-time secretaries hired. Over many protests, these things were accomplished. We saw that if they weren't, the man coming in the door or woman couldn't get a break. These simple services would require small sums of money, which we could and would pay ourselves. At last, the pendulum stopped swinging and pointed straight at Tradition 7, as it reads today. In this connection, Bill likes to tell the following pointed story. He explains that when Jack Alexander's Saturday Evening Post piece broke in 1941, thousands of frantic letters from distraught alcoholics and their families hit the foundation letterbox in New York. Our office staff, Bill says, consisted of 2 people, one devoted secretary and myself. How could this landslide of appeals be met? We'd have to have some more full-time help, that was sure. So we asked the AA groups for voluntary contributions. Would they send us $1 a member a year? Otherwise, this heartbreaking mail would have to go unanswered. To my surprise, the response of the groups was slow. I got mighty sore about it. Looking at this avalanche of mail one morning at the office, I paced up and down, ranting how irresponsible and tightwad my fellow members were. Just then, an old acquaintance stuck a tousle and aching head in the door. He was our prize slippy. I could see he had an awful hangover. Remembering some of my own, my heart filled with pity, I motioned him to my inside cubicle and produced a $5 bill. As my total income was $30 a week at the time, this was a fairly large donation. Lois really needed the money for groceries, but that didn't stop me. The intense relief on my friend's face warmed my heart. I felt especially virtuous as I thought of all the ex-drunks who wouldn't even send the foundation $1 apiece. And here I was gladly making a $5 investment to fix a hangover. In 1954, the name of Alcoholic Foundation Incorporated was changed to the GSB, the General Service Board of AA Incorporated, and the foundation office is now the General Service Office. The meeting that night was at New York's old 24th Street Clubhouse. During the intermission, the treasurer gave a timid talk on how broke the club was. That was in the period when you couldn't mix money and AA, but finally he said it. The landlord would put us out if we didn't pay up. He concluded his remarks by saying, "Now, boys, please go heavier on the hat tonight, will you?" Over to you, Anthony.
I heard all this quite plainly as I was piously trying to convert a newcomer who sat next to me. The hat came in my direction and I reached into my pocket. Still working on my prospect, I fumbled and came up with a 50-cent piece. Somehow it looked like a very big coin. Hastily, I dropped it back and fished out a dime, which clinked thinly as I dropped it into the hat. Hats never got folding money in those days. Then I woke up. I, who had boasted my generosity that morning, was treating my own clubhouse worse than the distant alcoholics who had forgotten to send the foundation their dollars. I realized that my $5 gift to the slippy was an ego feeding proposition. Bad for him and bad for me. There was a place in AA where spirituality and money would mix, and that was in the hat. There is another story about money. One night in 1948, a trustee of the foundation, trustees of the foundation were having their quarterly meeting. The agenda of discussion included a very important question. A certain lady had died. When her will was read, it was discovered that she had left Alcoholics Anonymous in trust with the Alcoholic Foundation a sum of $10,000. The question was, should AA take the gift? What a debate we had on that one. The foundation was really hard up just then. The groups weren't sending in enough for support of the office. We had been tossing in all the book income, and even that hadn't been enough. The reserve was melting like snow in springtime. We needed that $10,000. Maybe, some said, the groups will never fully support the office. We can't let it shut down. It's far too vital. Yes, let's take the money. Let's take all such donations in the future. We're going to need them. Then came the opposition. They pointed out that the foundation board already knew of a total of $500,000 set aside for AA in wills of people still alive. Heaven only knew how much there was we hadn't heard about. If outside donations were declined, absolutely cut off, the foundation would one day become if outside donations weren't declined, absolutely cut off, then the foundation would one day become rich. Moreover, it's the slightest intimidation to the general public from our trustees that we needed money, we could become immensely rich. Pass it on.
Oh,
over to you, Paul.
Yeah. Just a minute. It's vanished, Anthony.
You're on compared.
1 minute. Right.
compared.
When?
Page 164 compared,
Right. Okay. Okay. Hold on.
which is halfway down the second paragraph on the bottom. There it is,
Right.
compared. See it? Compared.
Uh, I don't see it actually. Oh yes,
About
compared to this prospect, the $10,000 under consideration wasn't much, but like the alcoholic's first drink, it would, if taken, inevitably set up a disastrous chain reaction. Where would that land us? Whoever pays the piper is apt to call the tune. And if the AA Foundation obtained money from outside sources, its trustees might be tempted to run things without reference to the wishes of AA as a whole. Relieved of responsibility, every alcoholic would shrug and say, oh, the foundation is wealthy, why should I bother? The pressure of that fat treasury would surely tempt the board to invent all kinds of schemes to do good with such funds and so divert AA from its primary purpose. The moment that happened, our fellowship's confidence would be shaken. The board would be isolated and would fall under heavy attack of criticism from both AA and the public. These were the possibilities, pro and con. Then our trustees wrote a bright page of AA history. They declared the principle that AA must always stay poor. Bare running expenses plus a prudent reserve would henceforth be the foundation's financial policy. Difficult as it was, they officially declined that $10,000 and adopted a formal, airtight resolution that all such future gifts would be similarly declined. At that moment, we believe the principle of corporate poverty was firmly and finally embedded in AA tradition. When these facts were printed, there was a profound reaction. To people familiar with endless drives for charitable funds, AA presented a strange and refreshing spectacle. Approving editorials here and abroad generated a wave of confidence in the integrity of Alcoholics Anonymous. They pointed out that the irresponsible had become responsible, and that by making financial independence part of its tradition, Alcoholics Anonymous had revived an ideal that its era had almost forgotten.
Okay, yeah, that's great. It's very cognizant with the illustration and going into the 12 and 12 is clear cut direction, because by being fully self-supporting and declining outside contributions, the 12-step group, it protects the fellowship structure and the basic spiritual foundation. Hence every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And it starts off by self-supporting alcoholics. Well, because when I know, and it's very common, that commonality of when an alcoholic or a drug addict is in active addiction, there's a lot of irresponsibility going on. Whoever heard of such a thing? So back then you can imagine, yet we find that's what we have to be. So one of the principles, is that each member is responsible for his or her own recovery. So I know when I first come in, from my own experience, I was a bit broke, busted, disgusted, and it was that common thing. And I'd come from a very pitiful place, really, when I think about it. So I weren't working when I first come in. I was on benefits, but I was told this, and I kind of knew that it weren't about just taking, and I was told, well, if you are a little bit skint, just change the tenor up, or on Zoom. Obviously you do it on Zoom by a bank transfer. But when I come in, obviously we hadn't been reusing the Zoom. We only used that in the pandemic, even though the modem's a modem. It talks about it in the forward to the fourth was still inactive, it was working. So, I changed the tenor up, or, and I'd always put something in, and I still do that today, and the first part of the tradition 7 makes it clear that responsibility extends to the members of the local group as it passes the basket for contributions. So, with Bill Wilson, he gave the slip. He said it was an ego feeding proposition for himself, and and then he realized that, you know, the people were saying like, we're struggling. This, you know, the landlord said, if we don't pay the bill, you know, they're going to close the venue. Now, this is all about, we're here to serve and not be served. This is all about having the threshold of the meeting or the login available for the newcomer or the person coming back from a relapse, you know, and
I
you
think
know,
there's a few very simple. Sorry, do finish, Anthony.
yeah, if the group, you know, if the group collects more than necessary, because it's, you know, it goes it goes to use, you know, it don't just get held onto, you know, it goes to the still suffering, you know, drug addict, alcoholic, it goes up to the world, the area, you know, because the literature, you know, it's all there, all has a purpose, it all has a purpose. So you know, if people, you know, I'll let you talk and then I'll come back in a minute. Go on, Paul.
So, you know, I think there's various very important principles at work here that are embedded in this tradition. And as always, Anthony, you know, the steps are for the well-being and the health of the individual, and the traditions are for the health and the well-being of the group. And of course, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to addicts and alcoholics that are still suffering. So a group is able to provide a welcoming atmosphere of equality and serenity to anyone that comes in, as a result of having an active, healthy group conscience under one supreme authority, under God's power and authority. Uh, and then members of the group recognize that common welfare comes first, because personal recovery depends upon CA unity. And also, we're not affiliated. We use things like Zoom, YouTube, WhatsApp in the rooms, Skype, but we're not affiliated with any of these things. And similarly, we don't accept money from persons that are not active members of 12-step recovery, or we ought not to. You can't say that no member ever does, but, you know, I know you and I, Anthony, we've known of one or two members, not for some time, it has to be said, who have done that. I believe we had a discussion about that last year, if I remember correctly, Anthony. And unfortunately, not everyone sees it that way. But of course, you know, it's a great thing to deal with money. And of course, there's nothing wrong with money itself. The problem is the love of money. It's the love of money that's the problem, not money itself. Money is an inanimate object. So it's men's relationships to money. And, you know, it's a very interesting tradition. And I think it has to do with being self-supporting and being responsible as a group to seeing to your own affairs. And I think it's very key to personal recovery, Anthony, that no one's going to knock on your door, or you tell me if I'm wrong, Anthony, but no one's ever knocked on your door, said, okay, Anthony, I'll take care of all your bills this next year. It'll be all right. Don't you worry about any bills, you know. And in the same way, you've had to take a stand and pay your own way, haven't you? And so have I, you know, and that's the right thing to do, you know. And as groups, we've got to be self-supporting, you know. Now, I've had a lot to do with an organization called the Online Service Area, the OSA, and I have to say, Anthony, they break this tradition. They pay for groups to use their Zoom rooms, and that's clearly a violation of Tradition 7. Every group must be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. It's crystal clear. There's a group that I have the privilege of being involved with, Anthony, and you know, we are fully self-supporting and fully autonomous, you know, with one primary purpose, you know, and our common welfare comes first, and we're able to provide a serene, safe, spiritual atmosphere conducive to recovery, because we try to keep the traditions, and have done for a long period of time. And you know, we don't collect any money. We do once a year, simply to cover the Zoom license, but we don't collect monies because we don't have any expenses. So therefore, it's very liberating, Anthony. But I do have to make the point that this body, the OSA, they break this tradition blatantly by encouraging new groups to use their Zoom rooms, you know. And for me, it's very important that we try, Anthony, to stay as close to the traditions as possible. What do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree. So, the first six traditions are the build up to this tradition, common welfare for our group purpose, the only desire, the autonomy, the primary purpose, the six is, the prestige, divert us from our primary purpose, and this one is about being fully self-supported, right? So it's, you look at, he says, then I woke up, I who had boasted my generosity that morning was treating my own clubhouse worse than the distant alcoholics who had forgotten to send the foundation their dollars. I realized that the $5 gift to the slippy was an ego feeding proposition, bad for him and bad for me. There was a place in AA where spirituality and money would mix, and that was in the hat, right? Because we can't mix spirituality with money. You can't rightly touched on it that it's not about the love of money, right? Like money, money's here to be stewarded, right? Money's to be stewarded, because otherwise people do come. And it says it here in this tradition that people wanted to make money out of this, and this, and then they said no, we can't do this, so, and the primary purpose is to make sure that this message is being carried worldwide. So the second part of this tradition addresses the issue of the fellowship not becoming involved with outside issues or conflicts that could arise by accepting outside contributions. If such contributions are accepted, the group and its members might feel obligated to make some kind of concessions to the individual or organisation making that donation. Declining these contributions keeps the fellowship independent, and it is a spiritual principle. From outside influences, it also cuts out the need to constantly chase donor funding and government grants. Now, as the internet became a part of our daily life, members of the 12-step group naturally began gathering together online and mutual support. Now, you kind of touched on the OSA. I don't really get too much involved with that, but I mean, at the end of the day, it should be left to the group to be fully self-supported, in my opinion. And many other 12-step online support groups, but not all, were able to adhere to Tradition 7. As you said, you're part of a group that adheres to it and remains self-supporting, keeping outside advertising of their websites and out of their online meetings. So that's where, it's about realizing what our primary purpose is, right? And our primary purpose is to make sure that this message gets carried worldwide, but we're not affiliated with anyone else. So, so it's a thing that these traditions, the way they've been put in place, are very clever. And as you rightly said, the steps are there to stop us from killing ourselves. And these traditions are here to stop us killing each other, because we're an ego band, of, an ego-driven band, and so people, so what happens is people might want to start doing stuff and the ego attaches to that. And I was talking to a friend of mine. We got a group. We started up a group, and we had to buy a few things. And we said, keep the receipts. Reason being is, we'll take the money back out of the pot, so that way our egos are not attached to it. As the group starts developing and growing, God willing, then we'll just take it back, and that's it. So everybody's put a donation into everything, and taking responsibility, and so it's about AA members notes that many benefits in this tradition for the alcoholic or the addict, and the group, and for AA as a whole. Many come to AA, CA, NA at rock bottom and without a job or a place to stay, as we touched on before, and no payment is required at AA. But as the alcoholic gets sober and begins to make progress, because I know from my own experience, I wanted to give back. I wanted to make sure that the group, because I knew I'd been given this gift, freely I'd received, freely give. And, there was people, I'd been to meetings where people give me a book when I first come in. So what was done for me, I'll do back to newcomers as well. I'll do what was done for me, and as the alcoholic gets sober and begins to make progress in other areas in his life, he's able to place a contribution in the basket. And I remember we started a meeting up, and at the end of the meeting, the treasurer went to the pot, and there was £100 in notes in this cup. So someone had contributed £100 towards the meeting, which was fantastic. Never found out who it was, but it was fantastic that people do that. But you've got to be very careful. You can't. For me, it's about, you can't mix spirituality with money, and that's I like that Pied Piper illustration. The lure of money has led many astray. It could happen to us, and he's going on, he's diverting off the path. Yeah, it's fantastic. I'll hand it over to you, Paul.
Yeah, and I think for anyone that's listening to this, recovery is a wonderful journey, and the privilege of looking into these traditions and the concepts and the steps, Anthony, is that we're not obsessing in the first instance about drink and drugs. We're not obsessing about all kinds of diversions from a connection with the Creator. The solution is to be in the solution, and to be involved in personal spiritual literature, to be reading this recovery literature, to be listening to broadcasts like this, to be in prayer, and to be trying to carry a message. And Anthony, I love listening to you, as you know, and I'm reminded of step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to addicts, alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So tradition 7 is very closely connected with trying to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles of being responsible human beings that have confessed our shortcomings, admitted the exact nature of our wrongs. We've made a searching and fearless moral inventory, Anthony. We have asked God for the removal of shortcomings and defects of character. We've observed our assets of character. We've made restitution. Right? We continue to take inventory. We build that relationship with the Creator. We practice conscious contact. We try to carry a message, being aware of the spiritual awakening we've had. And as part of that, there are groups and there is work to be done, and so we have a primary purpose, and, we have our common welfare in view, because our common welfare produces personal recovery, and we're fully autonomous, fully self-supporting, with no outside affiliations. So I was just thinking about anyone that may have landed on this podcast through YouTube or in the rooms or WhatsApp or Skype or elsewhere, and is perhaps struggling to get clean and stay clean. We have a solution. You've landed on Pure Gold with Cocaine Anonymous. It is a daily program of action, and it does involve commitment. And it's a great thing to look closely at these traditions and how groups function. But at the same time, Anthony, we've got to maintain that often elusive balance, haven't we? It's a wonderful thing, all these things, but as part of a balanced life, we've got to maintain our personal recovery. It's very easy to become imbalanced, I think. And the beautiful thing about the traditions I see is the wisdom, the great thinking behind them and the principles involved. And, I'm trying to think of personal experience. I remember when a meeting was started in this town 15 years ago, Anthony, and it was a very small meeting. But yet it was amazing. We ran it for a year, and it didn't really end up with enough support. Small town, but we ran it for 51 weeks. And it was a 2-hour meeting every Saturday, and we had literature, we had key tags, we had public information, pamphlets and things like that, and obviously tea, coffee, biscuits, and the rent of the room. And we never had a problem paying for those things. And I think it's a great thing to put your trust in God. That's the thing that's not mentioned in the wording of this tradition. But I think the ethos behind it, Anthony, is that God will provide. If you're doing the right thing, God will provide. What do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. If where God guides, He will provide. And this tradition, also helps the individual start enhancing a bit of dignity as well. So rightly so, you said it, you know, about the 12th step, the first 11 steps of the alignment, the 12th step is the assignment. Once we've worked the first 9 steps, you know, done what's suggested in the first 9 steps, we give up, we own up, and we make up. But in the 10, 11, and 12 process, we start waking up, and we get to the 12th step, and it says we've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We try to carry this message to addicts and practice these principles in all our affairs. So this tradition 7 should be coming into your home, your occupation, your community, and the fellowship. So what we start learning in this process through these traditions, because these traditions can be implemented into your life as well on a daily basis. You know, I know people that have started businesses, you know, and they adhere to a group conscience. You know, they implement these traditions into the ethos of their business as well. You know, but this tradition, you know, it is fantastic because it is a spiritual principle about being fully self-supporting and trusting in God, as you just said. Rely on infinite God and not finite self, right? And once you start relying on God, and if it's God's will, it's God's will. If the meeting takes off, and it, you know, if it's God's will, it's God's will. If it withers and pops, then it, you know, it folds. But you know, it's about this. These traditions are very, as you said, there's a lot of wisdom in these traditions. You know, you start looking at the principles. It's 36 of them, as you said, the steps, traditions, concepts. And when you start adhering to these, because as you said as well, when the neurosynopsis starts changing in the mind, that's why they brought the 90 and 90 out, because today my thinking has changed to, it says talk about love and tolerance of others is our code, constant thought of others, right? So when we go through the day, we start our day off and do what I need to do, you know, and you get down and I answer my step 11 in the mornings, you know, and I'd start it down page 86 and finish it on page 86. It starts helping me think of what I've got to do. And this fully self-supporting principle, it's fantastic because it shows you, you know, how it shows me. I'll talk from my own experience. It shows me how irresponsible I was when I was in it. I'd lost the power of choice, but now I get the power of choice by getting a sponsor, someone who's armed with the facts to take me through the work, and I start developing. And you know, as you rightly said as well, you know, objectively, I start identifying my liabilities, my assets. I ascertain an amends list in the first 9 steps. You know, I give up, I own up, and I make up. And in the 10, 11, and 12 step process, I start waking up, and it starts helping me to develop, to become, you know, discipline, perseverance, fully self-supporting, you know, and it's like taking responsibility. You're responding to my God-given ability. That's what it really does help start me, you know, it helps me to start doing, you know, and that's what it's done for me. It's fantastic. I love it. You know what I mean? I'll hand it back to you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Anthony. I've put up on the screen some information about meetings. There are lots and lots of CA meetings. You're welcome at them all. In my experience, you know, the message of hope, faith, and courage that liberates men and women from the obsession to drink and drug is carried, you know, in all these meetings. And these are just some of the meetings that are on the screen. The ones in blue are on every day. So, for example, these are UK times, but of course, everyone's welcome on any online meeting wherever you're from. But at the Breakfast Club over at the top left, underneath the top left pink box, so every morning 7:30, Great Gratitude 9:30, Pop-up Recovery will be on now every morning at 10:30, and then Weekend Recovery is on every day at 2 o'clock, and then in the middle there's lots of 24-hour meetings. There's one in the middle there, 1-to-1 marathon. It's constantly on. Underneath there's 2 ladies meetings, 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. every day. Weekend Recovery is back on at 8 p.m. and 9:30. Daily Reprieve is on at 9:30, Reaching Out every night at 11, and Tazana every night at midnight. So there's lots of meetings, you know. Never feel that if you go to a Zoom meeting, you'll have to put your camera on. In fact, only about a 5th or a 7th of participants do so. So never feel, you know, that you will have to do that. And And furthermore, don't think that you'll be forced to speak. You're not obliged to speak. You're more than welcome to come along and listen. So if you are using drugs daily or regularly, including alcohol, and you want a solution, we have a solution. Come along to a meeting and hear that message and get yourself connected and get some literature and into these steps. You know, recovery is a wonderful thing. Sobriety is a wonderful gift of God. You know, and we put in the effort, don't we, Anthony? And God takes care of the details. And you know, it's been wonderful sharing time with you once again, and I'm really pleased that you've come along. Is there anything in summary you'd like to share, Anthony?
Likewise, it's always an honor and a pleasure to meet with you and touch base and do this stuff. And sobriety is a gift. It's an absolute gift from God, you know, and I never take it for granted what I've been given here today. You know, it's just an absolute honor and a pleasure. I was a taker, but it's nice to be able to give back today, you know, and contribute and not take. I'll leave it there, Paul.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Anthony. And just a quick word about face-to-face meetings. If you're in Britain, the website at the top centre of the page, cocaineanonymous.org.uk, is where you'll find out about lots and lots of face-to-face Cocaine Anonymous meetings in Britain, and also lots and lots of online meetings. They're a website where anyone can advertise, as it were, their meeting on that website, and so get connected and hear the message of hope, faith, and courage. You know, our message is hope, our promise is freedom. That any addict can quit using, lose that desire to use, and find a new way to live. Okay, that's going to be a wrap for today, family. Stay strong, stay safe, stay in prayer, stay in the solution, and stay connected. If you're looking for help, come along to a meeting. Feel free to comment below wherever you see this podcast broadcast, and I'm sure some help will be on its way to you. Thank you so much, Anthony, once again, my brother.
Thank you as well, Paul, my brother.
Okay, stay strong, family. Shalom, shalom.